All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our TALMUD Torah sponsors, Shmuel Leba Dinovitz, for dedicating all the shir and drushos this month in memory of Shmuel's father, HaRav Peretz Avraham ben Harav Benyamin Moshe. Our week of learning sponsors, Ira Miriam Grossman, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Ira's mother, Frieda Bas Shmuel, and good. Those are our sponsors. Also, we thank all of our sponsors for their dedication, for their generosity. We hope all of the neshamas have an aliyah and the families a neshama. And I will say with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Actually, a lot to do today. Today's daf is Chaf Beis 22. We are picking up on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis 21b, and we are picking up 22 lines up from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Maskif la Ravashi. So we'll say, if you remember again, we ended off yesterday's daf with the Gemara telling us that there are three lessons, three halachas derived from the previous sugya. Halacha number one, Eid Na'aseh Dayan, that an aid, a witness, has the ability to morph into a judge. Now, halacha number two, Dayanan hamakirin chasimus de'edim einun tzrichin lahad bifneim. If the judges themselves recognize the signatures of the witnesses, there doesn't need to be any additional testimonial corroboration. You don't need witnesses to testify about the signatures. And the last thing, Shmamina, Dayanan shin makirin chasimus de'edim tzrichin lahad bifnei kol echad ve'echad. And halacha l'maaseh, we also learned that if any of the judges do not recognize the signatures of the witnesses, we need to testify in the presence of each of those judges who are not yet knowledgeable or do not yet know about the authenticity of the signatures. Good. Says the Gemara, Maskif Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi raises a kasha, and he says as follows, Bishlama Eidna Sadayon Shaminan Minei. And I will say, remember again, all of this was also learned out from the story that the Gemara recorded. So the Gemara now says as follows. The Gemara now says, So the Gemara now says, so Bishlama Eid Nasadayin Shamina Minei. So I understand how you could learn out the concept that the aid could become a dayon from the previous story. That was explicit in the story. To which the Gemara says, Ela dayonon hamakirin chasimos eidin ein tzrichin laha'id bifneihem. But halacha l'maaseh, the notion that if a dayon recognizes a signature, there doesn't need to be any additional testimony from witnesses to corroborate the authenticity of the signature. Maybe you can't bring that out from that previous story. Why? Dilma, the olam emalachat tzrichin. Maybe really you do need the shiny hacha, the kamakaima hagada bechad. Maybe the Rabbi say, remember again, maybe the previous case was different. Remember again, Rabbi say, in the case that we mentioned yesterday, 2 out of the 3 dayanim recognized the signature. The third did not. So maybe again in that case, at the end of the day, you did have 2 of the dayanim testifying in the presence of the third. Therefore, there was some level of testimony. And I will say about the idea that if the dayanim do not recognize the signatures, so you have to testify in the presence of each of the dayanim. Dilma li olam emelacha in tzrichin. Maybe in general, I would say you actually don't need to do that. The shiny hacha, this case was different. Why? Dilma kamakai. Shiny hacha dilo kamakaima hagada klal. Because if you don't have any type of testimony, then lemaisa. Let me say differently. If the 2 would not have testified in front of the 1, then halacha lemaisa there would be no form of testimony at all. Okay, so both say. So interestingly enough, the Gemara wants to highlight these three halachas, but yet the Gemara challenges these 3 halachos and telling us you can't necessarily derive it from the story. Rabbi says we're going to see further. We will see the concept of Eid Na'aseh Dayon is an interestingly contested idea. What I will point out, Rabbi say, is that halacha l'maaseh, the one piece that we absolutely do walk away with is if dayanim recognize the signatures, there is no need for additional testimony. That is halacha l'maaseh, and that is incredibly important as well. So again, the only time we're going to need witnesses to testify to the authenticity of the signatures is in a situation where halacha l'maaseh, the dayanim themselves don't recognize it. But if they recognize it, we're good to go. Says the Gemara weiter. Says the Gemara weiter. Good. Yosef Rabbi Abba v'ka'amrei lahashmaita de'ed nasa dayan. So Rabbi Abba was going ahead and was telling over this concept that an aid could morph into a dayan, which I will say, if you think about it, is a profound idea, right? An aid could become a dayan. So the Gemara says, Isveira Safra the Rabbi Abba. So Rav Safra raised the question of Rabbi Abba, and he said, Ra'u shlosh shavein bezdin. So I will say, we'll ask a kasha from Mesachas Rosh Hashanah. Listen to this case. Let's say 3 people saw the new moon. 3 people saw the new moon. Ru'ah shlosha vein bezdin. And ultimately, again, obviously, so 3 people saw the moon, and the 3 people who saw the moon also happened to be a bezdin. They happened to be a bezdin. So what's the halacha? And remember again, you need a bezdin to be makadesh the chodesh. In general, to sanctify the new month, you need 2 things. You need 2 witnesses who saw the new moon, and they need to give over that testimony in front of a bezdin. So now, interestingly enough, what do you have over here? You have 3 people who happen to be a bezdin who saw the new moon together. So what should we do? Here we go. So Yamdu Shnayim v'yashiv mechavrem eitzla yochid. So what happens? 2 of the 3 essentially act as the witnesses. They act as the witnesses. So 2 of the 3, 2 separate from the group. They become the witnesses. They add on 2 more dayanim, 2 more judges. V'ya'idu bifneihem. And ultimately, again, they give their testimony. V'yomru mekudash mekudash. And then after the 2 give their testimony, then the 3. Remember again, the 3 who are now the new Beis Din are constituted of the 1 earlier dayan and 2 new additional dayanim. So then the new Beis Din could say, mekudash mekudash. The new month is sanctified. Why? She'in hayochid ne'eman al yidei atzmo. Because at the end of the day, an individual is halacha lamaisa not believed on his own. Okay, so what I says, I don't understand. But if you hold that an aid could become a dayon, lama likulihai, why do you need this whole process? So we'll say, remember again, just to review, the process in Rosh Hashanah is you have a Beis Din that sees the new moon. They saw it together. So 3 guys, a Beis Din of 3 saw the new moon together. Now, what do we need? We need 2 things. I need testimony and I need a Beis Din, right? The testimony is necessary to ascertain that there's the new moon, and the Beis Din is necessary to declare the new month. So what do we do? So 2 separate themselves out from the Beis Din and become the Eidim. Now we're left with only 1 dayan. So we add on 2 more dayanim. So now again, the 2 witnesses, the 2 quote-unquote witnesses, will go out and give testimony in front of the 2 dayanim. So says the Gemara, so if you hold that halacha l'maisa, eid na'asa dayan, then why do you need this whole thing? To which the Gemara says, leisvu biduchtaihu v'lekadshi. Just go ahead and let them stay in their place and let them be mekadesh the chodesh. In other words, let's say if an eidna said dayon, then just go ahead and do this. Let 2 guys give testimony, right? So in that moment, what are they? They're eidim. And in the next moment, then what? Let them morph into dayonim. In other words, and you could use the same pool of 3 for everything. 2 give testimony, and then again, after they give testimony, they could morph into dayanim, and they could be the very Beis Din that is mekadesh the chodesh. Why is there a need to go ahead and halacha l'maisa? Why is there a need halacha l'maisa to enfranchise more people onto a Beis Din? To which the Gemara says, Amrlei af lididi kashili. So he said, you know what? The truth is, I had the same kasha. Ushe'ilte l'Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, v'Rav Yitzchak l'Rav Huna, v'Rav Huna l'Chia barav, v'Chia barav l'Rav. So I will say, and all of these Rabbanim asked the question. And ultimately, again, they asked the question to Rav. Right? They went up the ladder, went to Rav, and what did Rav say? Va'amar lahu, hanuch le'edos hachodesh. Apples and oranges. Kiddush hachodesh, I will say, edos hachodesh is a doraisa. It's doraisa. Hanuch le'edos hachodesh da'araisa, v'kiyem shtaras d'Rabbanan. Oh, to which the Gemara says, no. Rav says, you're making a profound mistake. You're treating all cases of testimony the same, right? That they're all 1 unit, but it's not true. In fact, halacha l'maisa, again, there are different forms of eidos. Up until now, what have we been talking about, Rabbi say? Kiyem shtaras. The concept of kiyem shtaras is a d'Rabbanan, right? Remember again, Rabbi say, Midaraisa, if you have a shtar is a shtar. Right? Midrabanan, there's a concept that halacha l'maisa, if the shtar is challenged, so there's a way to go ahead and certify the shtar. That process is called kiyum shtaris. What do you need for kiyum shtaris? So you need a couple of different things. Either you need, there's a machlokas exactly what you need. But for our purposes, what you need is a beis din to go ahead and uphold the shtar through testimony. So I need dayanim and I need edim. Since it's D'Rabbanan, Chazal said, you could use the same pool for everything. Eid Naaseh Dayon. So you could have guys who act as witnesses and then morph into judges. In Eidos HaChodesh, which is Eidos Da'oraisa, I need Eidim, and I also need a Beis Din. In that case, we do not say Eid Naaseh Dayon. In that case, you need two distinct groups of Dayanim and Eidim, and therefore Abosai, in the example that we gave, when the group of three who are a Beis Din see the new moon, to separate themselves, they become Eidim. And once they become Eidim, they can no longer be what? Dayanim. So we need to add on two more to make the Dayan group. So therefore Abosai, really incredible, what comes out of here Abosai, therefore is halacha l'maisa what? We hold Eid Naaseh Dayon, but only in what case? Only what case? D'Rabbanans. But mid'oraisa, we do not hold of Eid Naaseh Dayon. Incredible. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav, Huna Amar Rav. Shlosha sheyashvu l'kaim es ashtar. We'll say, listen to this case. 3 people sit down to go ahead and certify a document. So we'll say, so remember again, this is now a beis din. So let's just understand what's happening over here. A beis din is coming to sit down to go ahead and certify a document. They're going to work through this process and certify that the document is in fact a legitimate document. Okay, and remember again, what's going to be the result of that process? What's the result of that process? What we call a handpick, right? Or an asharta. We're going to go, an actual certification, a certification that is written on the document itself. So that's what we're going to do. So the 3 sat down. Vikara Ira Miriam, but someone raised an objection, or an objection was raised about one of them. So what was I say now? Essentially, the type of objection we're talking about is what kind of objection? The type of objection that would invalidate this person from serving as a dayan. At least that's what we assume. So we'll say, now what do I do? So the Gemara says, okay, not a problem. So the Gemara says, Ad shelo chasmu mi'idin alav v'chosem. Now we'll say, here's the interesting case. We're going to clarify this in just a moment. But it seems here's what's happening. We've got Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Right? They're sitting down to certify a document. As they're sitting down in the certification process, an objection is raised about the legitimacy or fitness of Reuven. It happens to be that Shimon and Levi know that the objection is not a valid objection. So, and they could testify, in other words, a lot of testimony over here. They could testify to the kashrus of Reuven. So the Gemara says, if they have not yet signed the certification, the handpick, the asharta, if they have not yet signed it, they could testify on behalf of Reuven's behalf, certifying that Reuven himself is fit to serve as a dayan, and then they could all sign on the certification on the handpick. However, if they signed the certification and then the objection was raised, ein mi'idin alav. Then Abu say at that point in time they can no longer testify about Reuven. Why can't they testify about Reuven? Why not? Because Abu say here's the problem. The problem is now the testimony looks biased. Because here Shimon and Levi are signed onto a certification together with Reuven. So the truth is, it's going to be embarrassing for them and erode their personal legitimacy if halacha l'maisa Reuven turns out to be unfit to give this to be a dayan. So therefore, we can't trust what they say because they may just be trying to save their own reputation. If you look at Rashi says, last Rashi on the daf, havuluhu nogin be'edus. Now at this point in time, they're nogeh be'edus, right? They have a vested interest in the testimony. Sheginai lahem sheyeshvu imposul din, because it's embarrassing for them to be part of a certification together with someone who is apostle. Okay, so pretty straightforward. So the Gemara says, demise. Let's talk about this a little bit. When we talk about the fact that Reuven, there's an objection raised against Reuven. What type of objection? De gazlanusa. So we'll say, if somebody comes forward and says, Reuven is a gazlan. You know this dayan, He's an embezzler. He runs a Ponzi scheme, right? He went ahead and he stole money. He's a gazlan. So the Gemara says, top of Chav Beis Amud Aleph, treyu treininu. So Rabbi says, here's the problem. So now let's say Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting together. They're about to certify the documents, right? So now what's happened? So A and B come forward and say Reuven is unfit. He's a gazlan. Okay. So now what's going to happen? Shimon and Levi are going to come along and say what? He's not a gazlan. So okay, let's say no, it's not true. He's not a gazlan. Okay, we'll say, what do we call this in halacha? Trey or trey. And we'll say, what's trey or trey? 2 witnesses against 2 witnesses. See, here's the problem. 2 witnesses against 2 witnesses are not going to be enough to restore Reuven's cheskas kashrus. Look at Rashi, Tap Rashi on Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. So ki amri lo gazal havalu trei utrei v'lo miskasher bahachi. I will say, so remember again. So let's go back for just a moment. What's happening over here? Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are a Beis Din. They're sitting down together to certify a document, right? Based on the previous sugya, they recognize the signatures on the document, so they can go ahead and certify it on their own. They don't need additional testimony. As they're going through this process, someone or 2 other guys come in, A and B come in and say, Reuven is a thief. He's a gazlan. So what do the Raisa say? If Shimon and Levi know it's not true, as long as it's before they signed the certification, they could testify on Reuven's behalf and restore Reuven's cheskas kashrus. To which the Gemara says, why? That's not true. If A and B come along and say Reuven's a gazlan, but Reuven and Shimon, the other 2 guys on the base, and say no, he's not, that's 2 against 2. 2 against 2 doesn't restore your cheskas kashrus. 2 against 2 prevents anything from happening, right? 2 against 2 prevents the claim from proceeding, but lamaisa, the cheskas kashrus is not necessarily restored. To which the Gemara says, "Ir de pekam mishpacha." Oh, so maybe A and B are coming along, and what are they testifying about? They're testifying that Reuven is unfit genealogically, right? He's a mamzer. He's an eved. The truth is, mamzer is not a good example because mamzer actually would be fit to serve on odds. All right, but he's an eved. Rashi says over here, he's an eved. Ultimately, again, right? He's an eved, and therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, he's not fit to serve on the Beis Din. So if that's the and what I will say now. So now let's play this out. So A and B come along and say that Reuven is an eved, and now Shimon and Levi come along and say what? No, he's not. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. In this case over here, so the Gemara says, if this case over here, I'er de pegam mishpacha gilui milsa ba'almu. See, I will say, when you make a genealogical claim against someone, the truth is, that is actually, how do you resolve that claim? How do you resolve the claim? How do you resolve it? You investigate. In other words, I will say, that's the interesting of genealogical claims are the type of things that Eidos tells us that there's an issue that needs to be investigated. But lamaisa, that is something that we can clarify. So Allah says somebody walks into Beis Din and says Reuven the Dayan is an eved. Okay, the fact that Shimon and Levi say no, he's not, that doesn't do anything for us. We're now going to have to investigate and get to the bottom of it. To which the Gemara says, you're right. The olam emelacha ir de gazlanusa. Listen to this, Rabbi. Say this is such a beautiful Gemara. Here's the case. Here we go. Get ready. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are a Beis Din. They're sitting down certifying a document. As they're in the process of certification, before they've signed the certification, A and B, 2 more witnesses walk in. They say Reuven is a gazlan. He's a thief, unfit to go ahead and engage in this process. And I will say, what do Shimon and Levi say? Get ready for this. V'ka amri hani, Reuven and Shimon say, Yadinan beid the avid shuva. Wow. Reuven and Shimon say, okay, you're right. Reuven was a thief. He was a thief, but we happen to know that halacha l'maisa, he did shuvah. Now, Bosia, ask yourself, how could you know that someone did shuvah? So Rashi says over here, right across in Rashi, David shuvah, v'heishav es hagizela. he returned the stolen item. See, I will say that's why the Gemara says something very specific over here. You see, with gezel, with theft, you can know whether or not someone did tshuva or not. Now, granted, there's two parts to tshuva. There is behavioral tshuva and ultimately emotional or spiritual tshuva. You can't necessarily know if someone did emotional or spiritual tshuva, but l'maisa, if somebody stole an object, I can know whether or not they returned it. So I will say, this is actually pretty amazing. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, what the Gemara is suggesting is like this. Now we understand the brisa. So Reuven and Shimon and Levi are a beis din. They're sitting down to certify a document. A and B roll in. Reuven's unfit. He's a gazlan. Shimon and Levi happen to know that Reuven did tshuva. So they want to say, no, Reuven did tshuva. So Rabbi will say, what's the halacha? Can they restore Reuven's legitimacy and finish the process of kiyum shtaros? To which the Gemara says, it depends. What does it depend on? Did they already sign the certification or not? If they have not yet signed the certification, then Shimon and Levi will be believed to testify on Reuven's behalf, and halacha l'maisa, that certification could proceed as planned. If, however, the certification was already signed, we no longer accept Reuven and Shimon's testimony. Why? They're no geya b'davar. Because now Rabbi say they have a vested interest in clearing Reuven's name because they're signed on a document together with him. Incredible. On Rabbi Zera, Hamilsum Rabbi Abba Shmiele. So Rabbi Zera said, I heard this thing from Rabbi Abba. V'ilav Rabbi Abba de min Akko shachachta. And were it not from Rabbi Abba of Akko, I would have forgotten it. In other words, had he not reminded me, right, I would have forgotten it. I will say, here we go, listen to this halacha. I will say, just before we go on, I find it quite amazing. I will say, if you think about this previous Gemara, just understand what the Gemara is talking about over here. You have three guys who are sitting on a beis din, right? Now, granted, this is not the Sanhedrin Agadol over here, but Lamai said it's a beis din. It's a beis din. And what happens? Shimon and Levi know that Reuven is a thief, or Reuven was a thief. And they also know that Reuven did tshuva. I will say, sometimes what keeps us from making the changes we need to make is embarrassment in front of others, right? Because sometimes if I change certain things about my life, other people may find out about things that I did do, behaviors I did engage in, lifestyles I did have. And so often, again, people finding out about things prevents me from making the necessary changes I need to make. And sometimes what we see over here is that tshuva requires a certain degree of personalistic bravery. That sometimes a person has to be able to say, what people know or people don't know doesn't really make a difference. What matters is that I become the best version of me. Here, Reuven is sitting on a beis din. Isn't this a great thing? Think about it. Reuven is sitting on a beis din. Shimon and Levi know that he was a thief. They know it. But they also know that he became a Baal Tshuva. And I will say, more important than them knowing that he was a thief was them knowing that he was a Baal Tshuva. Sometimes you have to worry a lot less about what other people think or what other people will think, and just focus on doing the right thing for ourselves. I know that I have to be halig. I know that I have to become kaddish. I know that I have to become special. I know that I have to become better. This one's going to say this and this one's going to say that. Doesn't make a difference. Do what you have to do in your avodas Hashem. Do what you have to do in your personalistic evolution. Become the best version of you. What people will say, they'll say. But at the end of the day, I will say, what do you see? At the end of the day, when you make the necessary changes in life, people respect you for it. You see, I will say, you'd be tempted to say, how many of us would sit on a beis din with a guy who I know was a thief and became a Baal Tshuva? Not me. Even though I'm no tzaddik, but I wouldn't want to do it. And yet, you see, what do you see over here? Shimon and Levi respected him for it. They know his past. But more important than his past, they know his present. And his present is that he's a Baal Tshuva. And when someone's a Baal Tshuva, there is no greater title, no greater accolade in life than we call the Baal Tshuva. Incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. So here we go. Another interesting case. Three people were sitting down to go ahead and certify a shtar. So again, this is the beis din. So this is now a beis din certifying a document without eidos. They recognize the signatures. So Gimel Sheyashul L'Kaim Es HaShtar Umeis Echad Mehem, and one of them died. Tzrichin L'Michtav, they have to write B'mosav Tlas Sahavina V'chad Les Havi. Now I will say, just to illustrate what the problem is with this case. Not the problem, but what's going on over here. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi sat. They're a Beis Din. Again, no one's a thief. Everyone's a Baal Tshuva because we should all be Baal Tshuva, right? And they're sitting down to certify a document. They're going through the whole process. Document is good to go. Right before they sign, Reuven dies. So we'll say, so now the certification is valid because the certification was done with a Beis Din of 3. So we're good on that level. The shaila now is how do we sign this document? You obviously can't sign Reuven's name. Reuven's dead. So Lamaisa, what do we do? So the Gemara gives a formulation. What's the formulation? They should say, B'mosav tlas savina, we were a group of 3, v'chad les have, and one is no longer. Right? So I'll say, so ultimately, so this is, what do people see? What do people see when they read that certification? What they see is the actual certification itself was done with a group of 3. A proper certification with 3 was done at the end of the day. But Lamaisa, by the time it came time to signing it, one was no longer, one had passed away. Ira Miriam Grossman, the Kesuvos, alternatively, if you wrote the following, Shtaran dinan nafak lekadmana beidina, sulatzarach. We'll say you could also write, this document came before a Beis Din. This document came before a Beis Din. Then I will say, if you write this document came before a Beis Din, that's enough. Why? Because what does a Beis Din automatically mean? 3. So we'll say the idea over here, as the Gemara is saying, is the certification, which first of all, we'll say one important halacha, which the Gemara is teaching us, which is apparently that if you have a Beis Din of 3 sitting to certify a document, and they went through the process of certification, but one dies before signing, the certification is still valid. But somehow, but here's the problem. The certification is valid, but where do you run into a problem? How many signatures are you going to have on the certification? Only 2. So the verbiage of the certification has to reflect the fact that it was done in the presence of 3. So now we have 2 possibilities. Possibility A is ultimately, again, to write, B'mosav tlas avina, this document was certified in front of 3, but one is no longer. Sounds very poetic, right? But one is no longer. That's one possibility. Or possibility number 3 is just to say, this document was certified in the presence of a Beis Din. You only have 2 signatures. All right, people will understand between the lines what happened, that one of the Dayanim must have died. So the Gemara says, the Dilma Beis Din chatzafu. But one second, maybe it's a chutzpahdik Beis Din. So we'll say, what's a chutzpahdik Beis Din? Watch this. Shmuel, shnayim shadanu dinehem din. Shmuel says, it's actually quite interesting. Shmuel says that me'ikra din, you could have 2 people act as a Beis Din. Ela shenikra Beis Din chatzaf. But Shmuel says they're called the chutzpahdik Beis Din. So technically speaking, if you have a Beis Din of 2 that adjudicates, what they adjudicate stands, but they're called the chutzpahdik Beis Din. So therefore we'll say, here's the problem. So maybe when you have a document that says this, or certification that says this certification was done in the presence of Beis Din, people, and you have 2 signatures, people will say, oh, so you see from here that what? A Beis Din of 2 works. But a Beis Din of 2 is called the chutzpahdik Beis Din. To which the Gemara says, Dechsiv bei beidina derab na'ashi. It says in the document, to use the wording, a Beis Din like the Beis Din of Rab Na'ashi or Rav Ashi. And we'll say, look at Rashi, actually right across, Ki beidina derab na'ashi, archa de milsa nakit shu haya rosh yeshiva b'masa mechasya, b'mei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, so in other words, we'll say, you add in some type of verbiage that essentially says this Beis Din operates in accordance with the standards of Batei Din. Right? Like this Beis Din operated like the Beis Din of Rav Ashi. And therefore what you're doing is, you're certifying that this was a Beis Din of what? A Beis Din of 3. Just happens to be one of the Dayanim died before they could sign on the document. The Gemara says, "I v'dilma d'Rabbanan deber Rav Ashi kiddush Shmuel sfir lahu dichsiv bei va'amar lana Rab Na'ashi." So we'll say maybe they hold like Shmuel that ultimately again a Beis Din of 2 ultimately could work as well. To which again the document says va'amar lana Rab Na'ashi. Rashi says lizdakuke lei ulekayume decheven d'Rav Ashi gufei yiskiku. So we'll say, in other words, they add in the document itself that Allah Chalamaysa, this was done under the guidance of Rav Ashi. The idea being, Rabbosai, that halacha l'maisa, there has to be something in the document indicating that this Beis Din operated in accordance with the standards of Batei Din, which only use Batei Din of 3 dayanim. So Rabbosai, what comes out of it is really something interesting. Whereas normally Kiyum Shtaros will require 3 dayanim, if halacha l'maisa, again, 3 were present for the actual certification, but 1 died before the signing, actually the kiyum, the certification can proceed, right? With the 2, whereas really, but it's not really with the 2, it's really with the 3. But Allah Alamaisa, there has to be some type of verbiage in the signing itself that indicates this was done kidas ukidin. This was done in accordance with proper Beis Din protocol. Incredible. I will say Mishnah, fascinating Mishnah. Ha'isha sha'amra eshes ish hayisi ugrusha ani ne'emanes. Let's listen to this. Woman comes in front of Beis Din. And here's what she says. She says, I was married, but now I'm divorced. I was married, but now I'm divorced. So Rabbi say, what's the halacha? Ne'emenes, she's believed. Why? So this is, again, another illustration of this principle that we've been using now for the last couple of shiurim, which is, if you come into Beis Din and you provide information that we did not know without you, then what? You are believed to qualify that information as well. Rabbi say, what's the logic of it? It's a migo. What's the migo? What's the migo? You could have said nothing at all. You could have said nothing at all. We would have never known anything different. So a woman comes into Beis Din. She says, I was married, but now I'm divorced. What do we say? What do we say? Okay. Right? In other words, fine. Fine. In other words, we believe you because we did not know you were married. So now that you told us, you gave us the information, right? You assered yourself, so to speak, by saying that you are a married woman. Now you permitted yourself by saying that you are a divorced woman. We believe you. We believe you. However, however, if there are witnesses that she was married, vihi omeres grushani, and now she says, no, but my husband divorced me. She's not believed. Now we'll say, when we say she's not believed, we mean she's not believed without producing some type of proof. In other words, because I will say, in this case, remember again, her status as an Eishes Ish is independently established through Eidos, and therefore her mere word is not enough to change that status. Similarly, Amra Nishbeis Yutar, and it was listen to this interesting case. She says, I was taken captive, but I was not violated by my captors. Ne'emenes, she is believed. Why? Because also remember again, we had no idea that she was taken captive. So again, she's providing us the information that she was taken captive. Therefore, she is believed to qualify it. However, v'im yesh edim shenishbis v'yomeres tahora ani einan ne'emenes. And I will say now halacha l'maisa. However, if there are edim that say that she was taken captive, but she claims I was not violated, she's not believed. Right? Rabbi say why? Because remember again, we assume that stam shavuya, a regular woman taken captive, is violated by her captors. So if her shavuya status is independently corroborated, she is not believed by herself to qualify it without some type of eidos. So again, I'm going to say same cases. However, if she remarried and then witnesses come, she does not have to leave her husband. So I'm going to say it is not clear at all what that line of the Mishnah is referring to. The Gemara will discuss it. I'm going to say here we go. Let's say it is incredible. Amar Rabbi Yasi, minayin la pesha, asar pesha hitir. Incredible. We've been talking about this for like 3 months. Right? So now the Gemara says, by the way, how do we know the concept of pesha asar pesha hitir? How do I know that idea? That if I am the purveyor of information, if I am the source of the information, I am believed to qualify the information as well. So min haTorah shenemar es biti nasati leish hazeh leisha. Well, say, listen to this. This is talking about a father who married off his minor daughter. And remember again, about say this is a situation where the husband claims that she was not a besula. She was not the basula. So listen to the pasuk. As biti nasati leisha. The father says, I have given my daughter to this man as a wife. So the Gemara says, watch this. What's happened? Leish, when the father says, I've given her to this man, asra. He has prohibited his daughter to everyone. Hazeh hitira. To this man, Abba say, here's what's interesting. When the father says, I've given my daughter in marriage, she becomes asura to who? To everyone. Because after that statement, I don't know who she's married to. Then when the father says hazeh to this man, she becomes permitted to this man, and asura to everyone else. So both say, interestingly enough, the Gemara is suggesting that's the source of hapeh sha'asar hu hapeh shehitir. The father asers her to everyone by saying, I married her off. Doesn't tell us who I married her off. She's asura to everyone, and now he permits her to the man whom he identifies as her husband. Fascinating. To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. Lama likra. The truth is about to say, you don't need a pasuk for pesha asar peshetir. Why not? Svarahu. Hu asra v'hu sharilei. They're both say pesha asar peshetir is just a svara. And I will say, in fact, it's a migo. In other words, and it makes total. You don't need a pasuk. You don't need a pasuk. If you are the only source of information, and you could have kept quiet and not shared anything, but you choose to divulge, then by definition we believe your qualifications as well. It's svara. It's svara. To which the Gemara says, Ella kitzricha. You're right. The Gemara says you're right. So we'll say it turns out that pesha or peshet is a svara, not a pasuk. What do I use the pasuk for? Listen to this. So itzrich kra the kid Rav Huna amarav dam Rav Huna amarav. But say the pasuk is necessary for something else. Minayin la'av sheneman lesar as bita ben Torah. How do I know that a father has the ability to aser his daughter? In other words, we'll say, what does that mean? How do I know that a father has the ability, ultimately, again, to aser his daughter to everyone else in the world? To which the Gemara says, "Shneimar es biti nasati la'ish," because the Torah says, "I've given my daughter to a man." In that moment, when he says that statement before identifying who he's given his daughter to, halach l'maisa, what has he done? He has asered his daughter to everyone in the world, because in that moment before he says hazeh, halach l'maisa, again, she's asered to everyone. Hazeh lamali. So what do I need ultimately again? To the hazeh. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, first of all, look at Rashi. Shneman lesar as bito, kishikitana onara, shebiyada lakacha, kidamrina bergnara shnesvatcha, minayim shim amar kidashtia leploni, shuneman osra lakol. So we'll say, what this means is as follows. In general, a father is believed to say, I was mekadesh my daughter to a particular man. He's believed. Why is he believed to say that? That comes from this pasuk. As biti nasati leish. A father is believed to say, I have given my daughter over in marriage to someone. What do I need the hazeh for? So here we go. I need the hazeh as follows. Tani Rabbi Yonah, as biti nasati leish hazeh v'lo liyavam. So this is very interesting. That ultimately, again, the claim of a lack of besulim, ultimately, again, can only come from a husband, cannot come from a yavam. Okay, interesting. Tan Rabbanan, ha'isha sha'amra isha eshes ish ani. We'll say, here we go. More cases. A woman says, I was married. So we'll say, so first of all, very exciting sugya. We actually just learned the source of Pesha Asar Pesha Hetir. We thought it was a pasuk. It turns out it's not a pasuk. What is it? Svara, which I think has been the premise that we've been operating on or with since the beginning of this sugya. Here we go. Ha'isha sha'amra eshes ish ani, v'chazra va'amra, penuya ani, ne'emenes. So the Gemara says, if a woman says, I'm married, she claims I'm married, and then she says, no, I'm single. She's believed. Again, that seems to be Pesha Asra Pesha Heter. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. V'hashavi anafshe lechaticha di isura. They both say we learned, again, the concept that you could change your own status. When she says, I'm a married woman, I will say she conveys upon herself or confers upon herself a particular prohibited status. So why is she just permitted to just flippantly change that? To which the Gemara says, oh, what's happening over here? They will say where she gives an amasla. Amasla is an excuse or an explanation. Where I will say, what's happening over here? She makes the claim, I'm a married woman. And then she turns around a little bit later and she says, no, I'm single. And we say, hey, what's up? What's up? And she explains why she said what she said. In that case, she is believed. So the Gemara says, Tanya that supports this. Amra eshes ish ani, v'chazra v'amra penuya ani, einon ne'emenes. If a woman says, I'm a married woman, and then she turns around and she says that I'm single, she's not believed. Because once she says she's a married woman, she's conferred upon herself a status of Isser. She's not then believed to simply say, no, I'm not married. However, v'imnasna amasla, first white line on the bottom, lidvareha, if she provides an excuse or an explanation of her words, then she's believed. Rabbi say the Gemara gives a story. Listen to this. Let's listen to this. There was once a very beautiful woman, and she was beautiful, she looked beautiful, and she also was chashuv. She had status. What happened? So I'll say, so what happened? So there were a number of men who were obviously very interested in her, and they were pursuing her, and she kept saying to these men, oh, I'm sorry, I'm mikudeshes, I'm already betrothed. A little while later, right, liyamim, amda v'kidches atzma. I will say, by the way, you could see this, also the lashon over here is very interesting. Kidsha es atzma means what? She decided who she was going to become mikudeshes to. This was an assertive woman, Baruch Hashem, right? So in other words, no one was being mekadesh her. She was allowing herself, right? Kidsha liasma. She was giving herself in kiddushin. So the point over here is, a little while later we hear that she has kiddushin. So what's going on? So the Gemara says, Amrullah Chachamim Mara Islasos Kain. Chacham said, what's going on? How could you become mikudeshes now? You told people before that you were already mikudeshes. Amrulahem Betchila Sheba Alai Anashim Shenim Muganim Amarti mikudeshes. Before, the suitors, the guys who were coming to me, were not worthy husbands. So I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings or say, or decline the shidduch. So what did I say? I said, I'm mikudeshes. Sorry, taken already. However, achshav shabala anoshim oganim amarati v'kidash yesatzmi. But now, Baruch Hashem, that I have better prospects, right? Better shiduchim. So now I allowed myself to become betrothed. Kidash yesatzmi. I was mekadesh myself. So Rabbi say so. So the Gemara says, halcha. So v'zu halacha. So I'll say, so this is an example of an amasla, where a person says something, then changes, right? A person says something which sets their status a certain way, then says the opposite. If they give an amasla, if they give an explanation, then we accept the qualification. And this halacha this halacha of Acha, the Sarabira went ahead and brought before the Chacham in Usha, va'amru imnasna amasla lidvareha ne'emenes. If indeed she gives an amasla for her words, ultimately, she is believed. So we'll say, and that seems to be the halacha l'maisa. So we'll say, we have a lot of different things happening over here. So first of all, we have hapesha asar hu hapesha hitir. Right? So we'll say, so remember again, pesha asar hapesha hitir, we'll say, is you give information, you're believed to qualify that information. That's case one. Then I will say, that's different than the case we're dealing with over now. What are we dealing with over now? What are we dealing with now? Where a person says one thing and then what? And then what? Says the opposite. So Rabbi say, Pesh Asar Pesh Heter is, a woman says, I was married, but now I'm divorced. Those are not contradictory things. That's a narrative. So if she's the one who introduces the information to us, she's believed to qualify. Pesh Asar Pesh Heter. How do we know that? Svara. Case 2, Rabbi says, a woman shows up and she says, I'm married. And then she says, I'm single. Now she's saying contradictory things. So I will say, in general, if a person says contradictory things, what do we do with the contradiction? We ignore it. In other words, you say, no. What you said first established your status, and you can't just simply flip that switch off. However, if the person provides an amasla, an explanation as to why now they're providing contradictory statement about themselves, then what? Then they're believed. So a woman says, I'm married, and then she says, I'm single. We say, no. You said you're married. That's it. We're not listening to the fact that you're single. If you come along, but you say, no, I said I was married because at the end of the day, I was getting propositioned by these guys for marriage, not suitable suitors. So I just wanted them off my back. That's why I said I was married, but I'm really not married. Okay. That we can believe. And I'm asla. Both says Kavaita. Amra Tmeya Ani, the Chazar Amra Tahora Ani Mao. Both say, interesting case. What happens if a woman says to her husband, I'm Anida, I'm Tmeya, and then she turns around and she says, I'm Tahora, I'm not Anida. What's the halacha? So Amar Lei, Af Bizu, Im Nasna Amasla Amud Beis, Lidvareha Ne'amenes. Okay, so both say, again, it's the same halacha. If she gives an amasla, if she gives an explanation, in other words, so you're saying you're a nida, Now you're saying you're not a nida. Okay, so just what's going on? So if there is a legitimate explanation for this, then ein achinami, that's fine. So Tanamine Arba'im Zinnin. So I will say Shmuel learned this halacha 40 times. 40 times. The Gemara says, Va'afilu hachi lo avad Shmuel uvda benafshei. Shmuel did not accept this halacha when it came to his own circumstances. And I will say, what are his own circumstances? If you look at Tosis, this is actually very interesting. Tosis says, Rabbeinu Chanana Hevel Yerushalmi, Shmuel ba'aliz da kuke le'isesei. So Shmuel wanted to have relations with his wife. Amrele Tmea ani. She said, I'm a nida. Ulamachar amra tahora ani. Tomorrow, the next day, she said to her husband, I'm tahora. Amrala etmol Tmea yoma. I'm sorry. Amrala etmol Tmea yoma din tahora. So he says, what's going on? Yesterday you said you're a nida. Today you're not a nida. Amrale esmo lahavis bichila kihahi. What did she answer? She said, I was tired. I was tired. So when I was tired, I just thought it was too difficult to get into an explanation. So I just said I'm a nida. I just said I'm a nida. Okay? I was like, I just want to tell you something amazing. I will say, what a Musar Haskell. Shmuel's life is an open book to us in Kesuvos Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis. I will say, after Mea ve'esrim Shana, we go up to Beis Din Shel Mala. I would say, what are you thinking right now? Shmuel, like, why did I have to learn this about your intimate life? Right? This is like, I'll say, after 120, life is an open book. Life is an open book. And in front of the Beis Din Shel Mala, every detail of my life is read and discussed and talked about, from the most mundane to the most intimate, and it's all there. And it's all there. My family's there, and everyone else is there, and it's there. I would say, it's such a Musar Haskell to make sure that we lead lives that if someone reads about it, whether it's in Tosis, on Kesuvos Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis, or it's in the Beis Din Shel Mala, I'm okay with people hearing about the life that I've led, that I have nothing to hide. Again, it's hard. I don't know that any of us can measure up to the metric of nothing to hide, but at least to be cognizant of the fact that everything we do and the way we live is an absolute open book. Perhaps not in the front of others, but Lamaisa certainly in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To be cognizant of that and to make sure that we're living lives that when someone reads our narrative, we'll be proud of the story we've created. So Shmuel over here, so Mrs. Shmuel says to her husband, I was tired. So instead of getting into it, again, I just said, I'm Tamea, but I'm really not a nida. So the Gemara says, so ultimately, again, so finished Tosis, Asa Shal Rav. So Shmuel asked the Shaila of Rav. So can you imagine this? Shmuel comes to Rav, he tells him the whole story. He says, no, so what's the halacha? Amar lei im nasna amasla dvara and amenes. This is a case of amasla. This is a case where she's explaining why she said what she said. And therefore, what Rabbi say? And therefore, halacha lemaisa, technically, Shmuel, your wife is permitted to you. Rabbi say, the idea of Shmuel understood the halacha. For whatever the reason, he was uncomfortable accepting the halacha for himself. He was uncomfortable accepting the halacha. Therefore, again, I will say, so again, to be clear, the halacha is a halacha l'maisa, right? That a person is believed to flip-flop on status if they give an explanation for that change. But Shmuel himself didn't accept it. So I will say, so therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, Shmuel, what Rashi says over here, Rashi says, lo avad Shmuel uvdu benafshei, pam achas amra lo ishto kein, v'nastam asla dvarel, u'pirish mena achet tavla. Shmuel would not be with his wife, ultimately, again, until she went to the mikvah. So he did not accept the amasla for himself for whatever the reason, but halacha l'maisa we would accept the amasla. Tan Rabbanan, shnaim omrim meis, u'shnaim omrim lo meis, shnaim omrim niskarsha, u'shnaim omrim lo niskarsha. Supposed to listen to this case. Two witnesses say a husband died. Two witnesses, back to our Yevama stays a little bit. Two witnesses say the husband didn't die. Two witnesses say the husband divorced his wife. Two witnesses say he did not divorce his wife. So I will say, so what does the woman do in these situations? Harizo lotinase. Ultimately, again, she shouldn't remarry. Because halacha l'maisa we have contradictory testimony. Ve'imises lotetze. However, if halacha l'maisa she did remarry, she does not have to leave her second marriage. Okay, so the Gemara says, Rav Menachem bar Yossi Omer Teitze. Rav Menachem bar Yossi says, absolutely not. If she did remarry in a situation like this, she has to go ahead and leave her second husband. Rav Menachem bar Yossi. So Rav Menachem bar Yossi said, Emasei ani Omer Teitze. But when do I say that she has to leave her second husband? Bizman shebo edim va'acher kach nises. That's in a case where what? The witnesses first came and she married anyway. In other words, we'll say, so we'll call her Rachel. Rachel's married to Ruvain. Two witnesses show up and say Ruvain's dead. Two witnesses show up and say Ruvain's not dead. She should not remarry. If she remarried, in that case, Rav Menachem bar Yossi says she has to leave her husband. Aval nises va'acher kach bo edim. But halacha l'maisa again, if she remarried and then only afterwards. So we'll say, let's say Rachel's married to Ruvain. Two witnesses show up and say what? And say Ruvain died. Fine, she has remarried. And then afterwards, two witnesses show up and say Ruvain's alive. In that case, even Rabbi Menachem would agree she does not have to go ahead and leave her husband. Lo teisei. So we'll say, let's analyze this. Understand how this case works. So we'll say, here's what it sounds like. Halacha l'maisa. Rachel is married to Ruvain. Witnesses show up. Two witnesses say that Ruvain died. And what happens? So now, according to the Tanakama, ultimately, again, let's go with this. So two witnesses show up. Okay, let's go with the Chachamim first. Just keep it easy. So two witnesses say Ruvain died. Two witnesses say Ruvain didn't die. Rachel gets married anyway. What do the Chachamim say? Lo teitzei. Fine. She shouldn't have gotten remarried, but if she gets remarried, she doesn't have to leave her second husband. The Gemara says, I don't understand. How could that be? Michti treu trei. Rabbi say this is a case of two witnesses against two witnesses, and haba aleha ba'asham taloi kai. Rabbi say every single time Rachel is with her second husband, they have to bring an asham taloi. Rabbi say an asham taloi is a carbon that is brought for a potential infraction of a kares bearing sin. So Rabbi say, so again, halacha l'maisa, Rachel may be a married woman, so I don't understand, how is she allowed to be with her second husband? To which the Gemara says, Amrav Sheshes kagon shenises le'echad me'edeha. Interestingly enough, what's the case? Who did she marry? It's a little interesting. Who did she marry? One of the witnesses. And I will say, remember, the witness who comes along and says that Ruvain's dead, he has no suffix. So therefore, again, he has no din of asham taloi because he's absolutely certain that Ruvain is dead. That's fine, the Gemara says. What about he gufa ba asham taloi? What about she herself? What about Rachel herself? Rachel herself will be subject to an asham taloi, to which the Gemara says, ba'omeres barili. What's the case, Rabbi say? Where she says, I know my husband is dead. Now, how could she know for sure her husband is dead? Look at Rashi. Ba'omeres barili, ein libi nokfi, shebarili ilu haya kayam haya ba. I will say, because I know that if my husband was alive, he would have come home already. The fact that he didn't come home, and the fact that there's edus also that he's dead, tells you that Allah Chalamai he's dead. Therefore, I will say that's why, even though you have two opposing witnesses who say that he's still alive, ultimately, again, in these very specific cases, where she marries one of the witnesses, and she says again, so therefore the husband is sure that Reuven is dead, Rachel knows that Reuven is dead, there's no Asham Taloi. Rabbi Yochanan, Shnayim Omrim Meis, Shnayim Omrim Lo Meis. So Rabbi Yochanan says like this: if two witnesses say that Reuven's dead, two witnesses say that Reuven's not dead, Hare Zu Lo Tinase. Ultimately, again, she should not marry. Okay, that's 2 verses 2. She shouldn't remarry. However, the Gemara says, "Ve'em nises lo teitze." However, again, halacha l'maaseh, if she did get remarried, she does not have to leave her second husband. Conversely, shtaim omrim diskarsha, shtaim omrim lo diskarsha. 2 witnesses say that Reuven divorced Rachel. 2 witnesses say they didn't divorce. Harezo lo tinase. Rachel should not get remarried. Ve'em nises teitze. Ooh. Well, say, listen to this. So Rabbi Yochanan has a distinction. In Rabbi Yochanan's version, 2 verses 2 in a case where Reuven died, she shouldn't get remarried, but if she did, she doesn't have to leave. But conversely, 2 verses 2 in a case of divorce, 2 witnesses say that Reuven divorced Rachel. 2 witnesses say that Reuven did not divorce Rachel. Rachel shouldn't remarry. But if she did, what's the halacha? She has to leave husband number 2. Wow, the Gemara says, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. Why is there a distinction between the first case and the second case? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Tirgama Be'ed Echad. Interesting. What are we talking about? We'll say, what's the case over here? The case is where you don't have two eidim. Rather, what do you have? An eid echad. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Eid echad omer meis heminu rabbanan kibei trei. You know what? We're going to stop over here for today. We'll pick up Amiras Hashem with the Singer. Remember again, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. So Amiras Hashem, we begin at 5:45. We're going to be perfect. We're going to catch up. Amiras Hashem, we're totally on track. Let's say incredible Gemara, incredible Sugya tomorrow. Shkoyach.